Welcome to episode 2 of Marked Out Radio. I'm Sean.
And I'm Dana.
And we're here to talk about the autograph industry and one aspect of the autograph industry that is probably one of the more controversial aspects, and that is pricing.
Yeah, the value of the things that we collect has been a source of contention for years, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who, for as long as people have been collecting autographs, there are some people who sort of lament the fact that these things have value, but it's kind of second nature. It kind of makes sense that anything really that has demand and is in scarce supply can potentially cost money. And so, one of the things that we wanted to dig into in this second episode is autograph pricing and how we price autographs on the secondary market, how con guests are priced on the primary market. You know, when you go to a convention and you pay a convention guest, how that number is determined, and how a person who comes into a collection of autographs, or how a person who has amassed a collection of autographs can assess the values of those autographs. So before we do, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So Marked Out Radio is presented by Marked Out Collectibles. If you're shopping for autographs, check out markedoutcollectibles.com, our eBay store at marked-out-collectibles, or our sister eBay store at New York or NY-collectibles. To contact us for any reason, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com. All right, so let's first talk about the difference between the value of an autograph once it's in your hands versus the cost of paying a talent or a celebrity to sign for you. So I guess, why are they different? In theory, it should be the same thing. Buying something on the secondary market versus paying someone to sign something for you. You know, if I want a Derek Jeter signed baseball, why does it cost so much less on the secondary market than it does to send a baseball into a Derek Jeter private signing?
Well, I think it all comes down to the experience, which is more tangible in in-person events. I think the mail-in is, it's a different type of an experience. I think it also comes down to the idea it's being signed for you, whether it's personalized or not. You're able to have some input into like how it's signed, pen color, pen type, placement, stuff like that.
But a lot of people would push back on that. I mean, at some point, I'm gonna use a Derek Jeter baseball as kind of my anchor piece here. But at some point, a Derek Jeter baseball is a Derek Jeter baseball is a Derek Jeter baseball. Isn't it kind of BS that I can buy one on the secondary market for way less than it would cost to send one in, or to buy one at a private signing? I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a Derek Jeter baseball. No, like, why? I guess is it? Maybe it shouldn't be. I don't know. Or does this speak to some problem with how we calculate our pricing?
I think ultimately it definitely speaks to some disconnect in how we calculate the pricing. Obviously, if you were going to send into a private signing with Derek Jeter and they gave the option for him to do like whatever he has, like 4,200 hits, the amount of rings as an inscription, I could understand that being valued differently. But if it's literally just a signature-only baseball from two reputable sources with reputable COAs, it really shouldn't cost more from a private.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we really don't deal with sports like that too often. But in our worlds, where we're talking about celebrities or wrestling, there are people, and we've dealt with them plenty of times, who I think part of the issue is that if you want to bring someone into a convention, there's an expectation that someone's going to be paid pretty significantly for their time. In today's climate, a low-end con guest. So just to give you an idea, a couple of years ago, a low-end con guest. And when I say a low-end con guest, that's not meant as an insult. What that's meant is, someone who is a background player on a TV show, or a wrestler who's retired, who is not a main eventer, or someone who had was a character actor on television or on movies, or a horror star, maybe someone who was in a bunch of horror movies, not a star like Robert Englund, but sort of a star from, maybe they were a victim in a horror movie or something from 15 or 20 years ago. The kind of typical con guest who used to be someone who would come into a con kind of on their own dime and hawk their wares at a con, is now being paid guaranteed. Many of them are being paid guaranteed money, and the same is true of wrestlers. I think we definitely have to talk about guaranteed money and its impact on the value, or the cost, I should say, of in-person autographs.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't ignore that.
I mean, you got to do the math a little bit, and if someone is coming into a con, um, the expectation not that long ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, the expectation would be that they would make a couple $100 for a con, and now you're not finding nearly anyone who is going to commit to a con for under a couple $1,000s. And really, the market forces around that have shifted over the past couple of years, and that's going to be a big focal point of this episode. We also need to talk about
Absolutely.
secondary value, because a lot of people, and you see this, see people trying to list their autographs on eBay or Facebook or Mercari or whatever. And they'll go to they went to a con, right, and they went to maybe Heroes and Villains con or something back in 2013 or 2014, like everyone was doing, and they got a Stephen Amell autograph on an 8x10 because Arrow was a big show on TV, and they're really happy about it. And they probably paid, back then, I think Stephen Amell was like $60. So they
Yeah.
they paid $60 retail at Heroes and Villains Con, and then they paid $10 for their Beckett or JSA sticker because they were told that that's something they had to do, and then they paid $5 for the top loader because that's what they charge retail at those cons, and so someone is in $75 for that autograph, and then they go and they try and sell it on the secondary market, and they're shocked to find that they can't they cannot get 75. Well, they probably want to list it for 100, and they can't even get 75. They probably can't even get 50.
Oh
uh
yeah. That's the thing. There's whenever you're on these, like, and we'll get into the different like types of Facebook groups as well as the show unfolds. But when you go on different Facebook groups, there's always the question of what is this piece worth? That's a very, I'm not saying that mockingly. That is a very real question. And you'll always have a couple of fans will always pop in and they'll comment, well, signature A costs $50 at a convention, signature B, that's $100. And that is not the way this works. You cannot take retail prices, whether it's singular or if there's 15 of them on the one piece. You start adding up what retail pricing was, that is almost never going to be what you can get back for that piece.
and the truth of it is, and one of the reasons why that's the case, a lot of people might wonder, well, how the heck are these people selling Stephen Amell autographs on eBay for $40, $50? How are they taking a loss on all those, or are they making a profit? And a lot of people, you could probably intuit this, but maybe people don't realize, is that a lot of these, when a talent comes and does a con appearance, and this was kind of historically how these con appearances were funded, is they would do a certain number of minutes or hours in front of the fans, and then they would go behind the curtain and they would sign big stacks for the promoter, big stacks for other vendors who were helping to fund that appearance. And so if for example, if again, I'll use Stephen Amell was probably not the best example because he had deals that he cut with these organizations that were separate. But whoever the talent is comes in, they for that appearance fee, meeting the fans for 3 hours, they're also going to be signing hundreds and hundreds of extra pieces for pennies on the dollar in a quick controlled environment, and those are the pieces that are largely contributing to the extra supply on the secondary market. So you might say, hey, wait a second, I waited for 3 hours to meet whoever, um, even though how many guests are you waiting 3 hours to meet? But regardless, that time that you put in is being circumvented by the people who are going behind the curtain because they're spending hundreds and if not thousands of dollars.
Exactly. And then you're trying to sell the autograph you paid $60 for in a market that is being dictated by people that paid maybe, I don't know, 10, $20 per autograph in a controlled bulk setting.
Right.
So how are you possibly going to take what you got at the table and forget an investment piece that you actually make profit on? How are you even going to get back the money you put in? It's nearly impossible sometimes.
Right, which is why it's sort of amusing when you see private signings and mail-in signings, how the prices that they're because due to the nature of the agreements for these public appearances, a lot of the times that the prices for these mail-in signings are locked to match the table prices for the talent at a convention. That's done purposefully. That's not a coincidence. It's not because that person is worth X number of dollars. It's because that was an agreed upon amount, so as
Yep.
to not devalue that person's autograph. But it's kind of funny because for some of these pieces, you're mailing something in or you're buying something from a mail-in vendor, and it's almost like buying a car. The minute it gets to your house, the value drops by 50%.
Yeah.
And that's something that is it's shocking to a lot of people. And it's funny because when I was first doing this and I really didn't understand the economics of it, I kind of had the same misunderstanding about how it worked. I assumed that there was some relationship, there was some anchor between the price that a customer paid for something, that the retail cost of something, and its wholesale cost. Like if I'm buying widgets, if I'm buying some kind of product, right? The retail price is, depending on the industry that I'm in, is usually a fixed multiple of the wholesale cost of that product. That's how retail typically works. And the autograph business is kind of weird in the sense that there is widely varying wholesale costs for the same exact pieces depending on the circumstances. And we know we have experiences where the wholesale cost offered to us on a certain autograph, on a certain talent, we looked at the wholesale cost and we're like, that wholesale cost is so close to retail, we'd never do it in a million years. We'd never make any money on it.
Yeah. And the reason agents and other people in that position float numbers like that goes back to what Sean said. It's largely to protect the value. They want to control the value, which we talked about last episode as well. People don't want to give another vendor, seller, whatever, however you want to frame it. They don't want to give that person the price that they can make the profit on, because then in some cases you could be making more profit than the original person that's signing your items, and that's not something they want to allow.
Absolutely. I mean, this is funny, but it's true. During COVID, I wanted to make a couple bucks, and a lot of the later parts of the episode we'll talk about COVID, but I wanted to make a couple bucks, and I noticed that at New York Comic Con. So a lot of people historically, New York Comic Con, for a savvy fan who didn't want to sink big money, but a savvy fan who wanted to spend a couple bucks, there were ways that you could spend a couple bucks and make a couple bucks very quickly at a con like New York Comic Con. So I think it was 2021 at New York Comic Con. They had a bunch of guests who had never done cons before, and I noticed they weren't being repped by an experienced convention representative. And so there were actors from The Boys, and so I'll use that as an example now because The Boys is a hit show on Amazon, and actors like Homelander, what's his name, Anthony
Starr.
Starr, and the Deep, Chase Crawford, and Huey. What the heck is Huey's name? His dad's a famous actor.
Oh,
Jack Quaid,
yeah,
and
Jack Quaid.
and they were all there. They hadn't really done a lot of con appearances before, and so with that knowledge, I looked, and their retail price was low, was kind of artificially low, and I'm like, shoot, I didn't have the resources, or I didn't have the time really, because it was a short window to get together a lot of cash and a lot of items to do a big signing, but I was getting items signed at the table, paying full retail. Then I turned around, I went home, and I sold those same things for a 400% markup as soon as I got home. I'm not ashamed to say it, but that's what I did. And so I took my Homelander Funko Pops that I had bought off the shelf at Target, and I paid retail at the con. It was easy. I got them authenticated by Beckett, and I turned around and I went home, and sold them for $250 a piece. Now this was a couple of years ago, and the market has certainly evolved and shifted since then. And so I think it's important for us to talk about how that happened, and how the market has evolved in the past couple of years. So I know
Absolutely.
you were really excited to talk about. This is going to sound weird, but you were really excited to talk about the impact of COVID um,
Oh yeah.
on this hobby and on this business, because if those who pay attention, those who really study, I don't think that COVID did anything new, but I think it accelerated a lot of trends that were kind of beginning, and it also kind of exacerbated some of the, I'm not gonna I guess you could use the word problems, but the things that people consider to be problems, it really helped to accelerate and exacerbate those. So I don't know. I know that I took kind of a breather during COVID. I took a little bit of a break during COVID. You, on the other hand, did not.
No, COVID for me was a wild time as far as the hobby goes, and obviously, I want to start off by saying that none of our, you know, don't think that we're ignoring the magnitude of COVID as like a time, like on like the collector world versus the real world. I think it's very different. Would you agree? Like,
Absolutely. I mean, we're speaking strictly as collectors here.
yeah,
Obviously, I mean, I think one of the things you have to be able to do if you're talking about a specific niche is understand that there are external forces that impact that niche. It's kind of like uh, somewhat tangentially related, but one of my old friends, he lost a job opportunity as a result of 9/11, and I remember he used to complain about losing a job opportunity as a result of 9/11, and people would say, yeah, but 9/11 killed 3,000 people. And and it's obviously to sit there harping about that is insensitive, but at the same time, he actually, it is true, he lost that opportunity. So I do think it's important that we separate the impact of COVID on this niche, because it did happen.
yeah. But COVID definitely like poured, like as far as on the hobby level, COVID like poured gasoline on, like, on the little fire that was the hobby. Like it just, everything blew up. You had people. I know I speak for myself. As an For those of you that don't know, I am a teacher in my day job. So during COVID, I was home with pay, and we also had the stimulus checks. You had nowhere to go. You were just locked in the house, and then you had the blow up of the hobby on Facebook.
It's kind of funny because it during that time, it never really occurred to me, and this shows you, I guess, that we all cannot be visionaries in every aspect of our lives, that's for sure. But it never occurred to me how how much business there was to be done, and how much prices could blow up and take off as a result of the interesting Facebook communities that sprung up around this hobby.
Oh yeah. And just to like touch on the real like titans of change and bringing this whole thing in, I may be a little foggy on the exact order in which this happened, so guys, don't kill me if I put someone before someone else. but just a couple. And Sean, you jump in if you have any people as I go through the list
I'm
of
not
who.
gonna know any people. I never took part of this, but go ahead.
I think initially you have to give credit to the major pod, Brian Myers, Matt Cardona, Mark Sterling. That whole creation, I think, made nostalgia as a collector's community extremely cool. It made it very timely. People were chasing down the trinkets and the things that they collected as a child again. And during COVID trying times, being able to find like comfort in recollecting something that you had when you were 5 was definitely, appealing. I was taking part, and I think a lot of us were. It was a very appealing thing. Going past the major pod, you have several vendors in the wrestling autograph community that really, really had the vision to get rolling with making Facebook an actual place to sell. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but like before COVID, you didn't even see this many like groups and selling. Facebook was not really a place of business.
Well, if you did, it was people using it for classifieds. So there were
Yeah.
there were groups that were devoted to classifieds. But what ended up popping up, and it's funny because this is like anathema to me. When I saw this popping up, I was so turned off by it in the moment that I really failed to see its true potential. But there were these guys and gals who were setting up Facebook Live sales. So they would almost create an almost like an auction or like entertainment, visual entertainment, and little, I mean, micro communities. These guys almost became micro celebrities in a way, where they created these Facebook Live, either autograph signings where they would bring in talent to sign virtually on video, or they would just run sales
Yeah.
to their regular customers. They would kind of put on shtick and put on a show. And really, if you think about it, a whole new platform and whatnot, the platform evolved, I think, from these guys who initially set up these sort of video sales.
Oh yeah. I think Whatnot completely owes a lot of its creation to the Auction Andrews and the Marty parties and Rob Feinstein with Signed by Superstars, Ken with KNS, Brian Sokol then with Golden Ring Collectibles, High Spots. How could I forget High Spots? Who we always affectionately refer to them as like the Walmart of the wrestling game.
And this is just in the wrestling game. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure in the celebrity circles and in the sports circles, there were people doing this as well. I didn't know them. I don't know them personally, but there was this idea that I can generate interest in products on top of this sort of entertaining performance or show online. And I'm going to be honest, at the time, I was totally turned off to it. I wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, when you would tell me about it, I just couldn't even comprehend why. I was like, you're watching this guy talk. I want to punch my TV screen. I can't deal with it. That was like my mindset at the time. And so what I ended up doing was turning my back on quite a bit of money to be made because the fact is, and you're right, people were sitting at home with stimulus checks wanting to spend them on something. And as we're seeing in other facets of the economy now, when people have cash in their pocket and they are spending it, and they're spending it on items that are in limited supply, the prices of those items will skyrocket. And so what we saw in 2021 and 2022 were the prices of autographs that were historically considered relatively stable and relatively low. Even sort of items that had been considered low demand, the prices were blowing up tremendously.
Absolutely. And this is where I want to highlight one collector and vendor in particular, Auction Andrew, who, as we talked about, everything has a value. That's nothing we're explaining for the first time. Everything has a value. But if you go and Sean, if you think back on this, when we first started the wrestling conventions, when we would go to the wrestling conventions, the value on a lot of those pieces, signed or unsigned, it was nowhere near what it was now or during COVID. So you had a collector like Auction Andrew who had the intelligence, the foresight, the vision to stockpile. He had, like, original promos, original posters, Hasbro's, all these different things that he had, like an insane collection. And then when COVID came and you were able to have, and he was one of the groundbreakers on the Facebook Lives, he was, selling this stuff, is crazy rare in demand stuff that was all of a sudden now in demand. He was like the go-to source for that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and what's funny is, I mean, and we see this in all aspects and all facets. Not even just autographs. During COVID, I got the idea. I got the idea from some stupid Netflix show. It's a terrible show. It was called Slobby's World. I don't even know if it's still on there.
I've never heard
But
of it.
yeah, but this is true. During COVID, I watched it, and it was about this vintage clothing store that's out in, I want to say, Arizona. I think it's Arizona. And the guy was he's his vintage, and this makes you feel old, but his vintage clothes is from the '90s. That's vintage, right?
Sure.
When I hear vintage, I think like 1930 with the Model T4 or whatever. But vintage is it was '90s clothes, and he sells basically vintage '90s clothes to Gen Z college kids, at ridiculously inflated prices. And so my contribution to the inflated prices was way back when I was in college in the late '90s. I collected wrestling shirts, not because I was collecting them for value, but because I would wear them like a mutant in public. And I had some pretty rare ones. And so those pretty rare shirts I had, vacuum sealed in a bag, in a closet, waiting to be donated. And watching this show, I realized, wait a second, there's some real potential value on the secondary market here, and it was
Oh,
probably
sure.
largely inflated due to COVID. But and I sold many of these shirts. I had an original LWO Eddie Guerrero T-shirt from WCW. I had an original WCW Monday Jericho shirt. I had an original WCW 3 Count shirt. I don't even know if people know who 3 Count was. That very short-lived boy band gimmick. And I sold these shirts for hundreds of dollars each, hundreds per shirt, during the COVID boom, where people were just spending money on anything. And and the shirt market it's still a thing, but it's cooled off a little bit now. And I think what we're seeing now is there's been a little bit of a pullback um, in the autograph market from the COVID heights. But there are still other ways for that, like that innovators have been trying to keep prices and values high. So I know we talked about Facebook Live, we talked about Whatnot. We haven't talked about mystery boxes at all, because I know that's a thing that has contributed to the values being high.
Yeah, mystery boxes, to me, it sort of encompasses the like lottery ticket type of element, like like gambling in a way. Like there's an appeal in buying, let's say, sight unseen, an autographed item. Like let's say for $100, you will purchase a mystery box that has either one item or sometimes they'll have several items for a higher price. And typically, how they work, the vendor will show, let's say they'll show, I don't know, 10 items, 15 items. Some vendors will show every item that the boxes include, others will show some that are like the highlights. And then luck of the draw, what do you end up with? Do you get the piece that you really want? Do you get a piece you feel is worth it? Do you get a piece that exceeds your value that you put in?
Yeah, but what ends up happening is, I buy a $100 mystery box because I'm trying to get that Chris Hemsworth Thor hammer, right? But
Yeah.
what I end up pulling is an 8x10 of a Walking Dead actor, and so what ends up happening is I don't necessarily want that 8x10 of that Walking Dead actor, but because now those have entered this marketplace, there is some value attached to it, more so than there had been in the past. And so it's just an attempt for people, quite a skillful attempt, for people to move some of their inventory that may have been a little bit stale, or to move, to try to gin up interest in pieces that otherwise would be harder to move. So you see the mystery boxes kind of becoming a big thing post COVID.
Yeah, to peel back that curtain just ever so slightly. There's obviously, with mystery boxes, there are the people that get the items that are worth more than the customer purchased the mystery opportunity for. There are unquestionable values and bargains that come along. But then on the flip side of that coin, there is also the items in the mystery box that are worth less than the buy-in. That's like the whole, and every vendor has their own philosophies as to how they load and stack these assortments. But you try to put, a handful that are above value, handful that are below value, which is where the vendor comes in terms of benefiting. And then you have the stuff that's sort of in the middle that's probably valued at what it's priced at, and no one wins or loses. It's just a fair purchase, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be that there's a kind of an undercurrent of gambling, where I mean, it's not so hidden really, with mystery boxes, and you know, with Facebook also, it's very popular for them to do these kind of raffle drawings. They call them waffles because Facebook does not allow raffles on its platform, so they call them. So if you ever see the term waffle in the autograph groups, what they're referring to is a raffle. So someone's gonna get pissed off that I said that out loud, but I don't care. That's what it means. It means raffle, and it's very clever. The changing of one letter. But in any case, so we have the gambling with the mystery boxes. We have the gambling with the waffles, and then also there's it's kind of funny because this is the thing that's sort of saved the card and the sports card and non-sports card industry from itself are box breaks. And the reason why I'm even bringing this up is because many of the most valuable cards from box breaks are the autograph cards. But a lot of these local card shops, that used to exist and that used to sustain themselves by selling merchandise, are now sustaining their businesses by holding in-store box break events, or to tie it back to the COVID theme, online box break events. And so a lot of these retailers will be doing what's called box breaks, which it's a fancy way of saying they open the box of cards either in person and where you can watch and obviously you're buying things, or online, where as they open the packs, they are selling other packs, they're selling other boxes, they're selling the cards they're pulling, and there's sort of this communal and also frankly gambling kind of experience. And so anytime you have an impulse that is not economic in nature, and gambling, and there's lots of research that goes into this, and I really didn't anticipate this becoming a medical conversation, but here we go. But gambling impulses are not, when someone has an impulse to gamble, their incentive is not economic necessarily. Obviously people gamble for economic reasons. They want to win something of value, whether it's money or autographs or sports cards or whatever. But there's also this other component of gambling that gets people high. A certain segment of the population is addicted to gambling because gambling causes certain releases of certain endorphins in the brain, and it changes people's behavior, and gambling is highly addictive. And so you see how people's in this hobby, people are motivated by economics, but there are also additional motivating factors, and frankly the rush of gambling is absolutely one of them.
Oh yeah, I think I don't consider myself a gambler. Like I'm a sports fan. I don't deal with the parlays and all the apps. I just know it's just a dangerous combination. But there's unquestionable gambler tendencies in my collecting. As a business, as marked out collectibles, one of my favorite things, and we'll get into this deeper. But I love investing, booking the new talent that I'm convinced is going to be headlining WrestleManias for years to come. And you get the pieces at a low price. You hold on to them. You sell them for more when they blow up. I love that. That's clearly gambling because guess what? Every single talent we book that is up and coming, they probably won't all headline WrestleMania. I mean, I'd like to think most of them will, but
I think
there's probably gonna be one
you're
or two.
you're being overly generous. We may or may not have stacks of 8x10s of people who are already out of the business. But no, that's part of that. That yeah, I agree with you. It is a gamble. I mean, all business ventures to some degree. Anytime you're putting forward an investment. I mean, investment is really a nice way to say gamble in the sense that you don't know the outcome of that investment. But I think that there are certain. It's kind of like the loot boxes in video games, or where they lure kids. They prey on their basest instincts and their lizard brain instincts to get that stimulation. The mystery boxes and the box breaks and the raffles, they play on those impulses. And it's interesting because it really has nothing to do with on paper anyway, on the surface. It has nothing to do with the value or the price of an autograph, but those things absolutely have long lasting impacts on the value or price of an autograph. So it's kind of funny. I was browsing. So WWE, and really it's Fanatics. Fanatics is one of the largest, if not the largest, um, autograph groups. I don't know what you even call them. They're one of the people. Fanatics, if you never heard of them, they're a sports apparel company. They are a licensing company. They sign athletes to exclusive autograph contracts. They're putting on a big show in New York City in August, and Hulk Hogan is going to be there. So, long story short, I was perusing eBay for something to get Hulk Hogan to sign, and I stumbled across this redemption card, which was a pull from a recent box, I guess. And it was a Hulk Hogan autograph. That's why I'm bringing it up. But this was a person who ostensibly did a box break and got, it was a one of one super rare card. And this is the thing, one of what they create artificial scarcity by labeling a card one of one, even though there's nothing special about that card. It has a signature on it, but it's not like you can't get Hulk Hogan's signature for whatever. But that's just how it works. They have these one of one cards, and the value of this card, despite the fact that it's interesting because I think in 10 years the value will plummet, but because it hasn't been released yet and you haven't seen the picture of what the card is going to look like, the the bidding on it, I mean, I just looked at it, I didn't bid on it, but the bidding, it ended up closing at like $450 or $460, and which is funny to me because it's, Hulk Hogan's autograph on a card on the secondary market is what, 150, 140 bucks, 130 bucks, maybe something like that.
And that would be I think that's probably accurate, and that would largely be because the Hogan's Beach Shop, which for those of you that don't know, Hulk Hogan has his own retail store, actually retail stores in Florida, where he handles his own autographs through the mail, and he largely controls and dictates the pricing, because if you want to get Hulk Hogan's autograph, aside from a couple like Fanatics types events that he does, you have to go through him, and he sets the pricing.
But Hulk signed a lot over the years, and because there's so much on the market, if you want a random card, they're not expensive. But
oh yeah, if you just want a random card signed and a random marker, yeah, those are. I meant like one that's up to the quality of like today's product.
Well, but I think what you see is that someone there's this just. There's no logical reason why this card is worth any more than any other card, but they've created this artificial demand for it. Regardless, I also, we didn't talk about consignments. I don't, we had said before that we might touch on consignments on this episode. If it's okay with you, I think we should punt on consignments.
Consignments, like we were saying in the pre-show talk, it's such a big ball of wax and such a big concept now in the hobby. I don't think we could adequately cover it as this part of this episode. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
fine
mean,
with that.
because the world of COVID and the conditions of COVID led to an absolute explosion in autograph consignments being taken. Whereas, I mean, look, anytime you have a commodity, you have consignments. Whether it doesn't matter what it is, there are art consignments. There are your real people sell everything on consignment. I sold comic books in the early '90s on consignment at my local comic book store. Um, but today in today's market, post COVID, uh, the proliferation and the demand for consignments has definitely contributed to the pricing. But I agree, it's a full episode worth of stuff. But I did want to mention that consignments and the number of consignments have contributed to COVID level pricing, and I think that's fair.
Very fair.
So we're you know, we did talk about the fact that the market blew up during COVID, but we really didn't talk about. Now we're a couple years removed. We're rounding the corner on 2024 being it's more than half over. We're at at least a year and a half, 2 years with COVID in the rearview mirror, and the market, many of the market conditions that were created during COVID have since abated a little bit. They've decreased. What do you think? What do you think the cause is? Is it just that people ran out of money?
I think it's a combination of things. Just looking back, like let's look at the things that have sort of gone away. Facebook Live was a thing where at the height of COVID, all the key players you would have, it was like the Monday Night Wars on Facebook every single night. You would have all the big vendors going live almost on a nightly basis to packed rooms. People would room hop, go back and forth, see who had the better stuff, who was more entertaining at that point. And it was a time, and this is no shade towards the Facebook vendors. I was doing the same thing, just not in just not in a live. Facebook was so hot at that point. You could go on eBay to one of the big companies that had autographs on there, and you could purchase something for, let's say, $100 on eBay. You would sell it on Facebook the next day for 200. That was just that's how hot Facebook was. Nowadays, COVID's in the rear view. I think, like you said, Sean, people have less money. People also have more. There's other things you can do. You can go to the movies. You can go save your money for an in-person signing or an in-person convention. You can go anywhere. There's things you can do. You're not trapped in your house with nothing else to do and nothing else to spend your money on.
I will say this though, even though the secondary market prices have come down to earth, not for everything, but you can definitely get stuff cheaper now than you can get stuff in 2021. That's for sure. Um, but what hasn't come down are the in-person prices and the private
No.
signing prices. And so what we've seen is a little bit of a shift in the market to very, very high. And if you go to a convention Facebook page or a convention Instagram page, if you read the comments under, if fanatics for this con they're running in August, they've been advertising on Facebook like crazy. If you click the comments under their ads, it's one complaint after another about the pricing. If you go to the Facebook page of any of the major cons, you will see people complaining about the pricing, and that's something that, all right, there's always been people complaining about pricing. Let's not kid ourselves, but it was much easier to poo-poo and to dismiss people complaining about guests who were, $35 or $25, and it's a lot harder to dismiss their concerns when a basic guest is $80
Yeah.
at a con. And I'm like, and so trying to do the con economics, right? You do there actually there are funny stories and famous stories of years ago, of a certain, I'm not going to blow them up because there's potential legal implications here, but a certain con headliner whose family members would sneak black trash bags filled with cash out the back of the cons into the trunk of the car for nighttime deposits. There was sort of tremendous money being made by the headliners back then. You're doing the math on people who are not really headliners, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, so if a lot of these people will do, it would be like $80 for an autograph, $80 for a photo, $150 for a combo. So you're talking about a factor of 10 higher than it was years ago. And so they're pulling $150 a person. How many people are they seeing in a weekend? You start doing the math. If that person does even 100 people in a weekend, if they're pulling in 150 a person minimum, and you're doing 100 people in a weekend, and 100 people a weekend is a low number.
Very low, yeah.
Then you say, wait a second. There's tremendous money going in the pocket of these guests. These guests are making a tremendous amount of money on these cons, far more than ever before. And obviously, it's very hard to begrudge talent being paid, especially. It's not like on one hand, I was gonna say it's not like the con attendance is going down, but the truth of it is, con attendance is not guaranteed, right? I mean,
Not at all. No.
we've been to plenty of cons that were ghost towns, and we're looking at we've been to these cons and we're like, ooh, how is anyone going to make any money here? And then we've been to cons where you're elbow to elbow with people, and you want to spontaneously combust just to get away from it all because it's so crowded. I remember one of the worst con experiences I ever had was I think it was Walker Stalker. That was the one we got locked out by the fire marshal, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. It was Walker Stalker. It was the one where the was it Walker Stalker or was it Heroes and Villains where the Gotham cast was headlining?
I think even though it would make a lot more sense if it was Heroes and Villains, I think there was a Walker Stalker that had that big reunion.
But that was the one where people were getting locked out by the fire. It was so crowded, people were getting locked out by the fire marshal. I remember being in there and being shoulder to shoulder with people next to me, and horrified by it. You can't escape. You're claustrophobic. You're stuck in there. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because that company, even they were selling enough tickets that people were shoulder to shoulder in the building where the fire marshal had to shut them down. They sold enough tickets for that to happen, and they still went bankrupt in 2019. And that company is gone. Even though they were running massively successful cons, and a big part of that is talent pricing. It can't be ignored, and that talent pricing is so high that selling a lot of tickets does not necessarily guarantee a profit in this business. And that's nuts. That really throws the whole question of the economics of the business into flux. We know personally several people who book, and this is true of both wrestlers and celebrities, who have booked wrestlers and celebrities for cons, knowing at the time of booking that they would be taking a loss on that booking. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, there's talent, and the purpose of this show is never to violate the confidentiality. So we won't get into specific prices and names, but there's talent that will give us a quote for a booking fee. And Sean and I'll privately discuss the logistics and the realities of the offer, and you can't make money with that. Like if you do the basic math in your head of how many fans you have to see at what price per fan to even have a chance, forget making money. Let's just talk about getting your money back, your investment, your airfare, your potentially your hotel, like all of that. Like a lot of times it's simply not feasible. And in certain situations, vendors will, I guess, they're a bigger gambler mind state than maybe we have or other vendors have, or maybe they just have more cash at the moment than we have, and they take a big swing thinking, oh, maybe I can make it work. I mean, a lot of times they can't because the math is the math. You can't really change that when someone's fee is astronomical.
But what that does, and again, the purpose of this discussion is pricing. I will talk about booking and really get into the nitty gritty for booking on a different show. But I want to talk about how that impacts pricing, because the bottom line is, if I pay a guest, if I pay a talent $3,500, for example,
Yeah,
and I believe that if I believe that talent is going to draw, and I think I'm optimistic, and I think that talent is going to draw 100 fans,
yeah,
right? Now I'm paying $3,500 talent fee. I'm paying airfare. Now airfare, I don't care where you are in the country. It's a minimum of $500. So
yeah. It's not cheap.
let's just be generous and say $500. So now we're at $4,000. Let's say I'm paying for a hotel, so that's another $200. So now we're at $4,200. Then I have to actually print 8x10s for the table. That's another $100. So now I'm at $4,300. Okay. So what that means is, if I expect 100 fans to show up, I doing the math, I am at a wholesale cost of $43 per fan.
Yeah, you
What?
got to figure a way to make sure that those 100 fans that you're betting, that's what it is, a bet, a gamble, that you are gambling on showing up. You have to make sure those 100 fans are going to spend the $43. If they spend $25, you can get your 100 fans. You're still out of luck.
So really, what happens is, because someone takes an ill-advised booking, someone takes a booking where they're probably not going to make any money on it, right? What they're doing is they're artificially inflating the price of that person, for the fans, because now I have to charge this astronomical fee. And so I mean, obviously, there is if there is a demand, enough people will do it, and that becomes the new price. But
Yeah.
what ought to happen is, you tell the talent, no, we're not going to do this price. There has to be and if the talent, look, the talent, if it's worth it for the talent to show up, then they'll make money on the booking, and then they'll negotiate a lower price. But what's happened is, there are so many cons, and there are so many vendors who get in, they pay these talent inflated prices, or they give them inflated guarantees, and at the end of the day, they lose money, they disappear. And then what it does is, it creates an artificial higher ceiling for that talent for future people who might be interested. Because once you're a $3,500 talent, you're never going to become a $2,500 talent after that.
Yeah, and that's basics, like, economics. If I'm paid X amount of dollars to do a job, I'm not going to automatically the next month, the next year, be willing to take, a grand less on my value to do the same job. Eventually, of course, if the first vendor that paid them the full price flames out, loses their shirt, and they disappear, and maybe that talent doesn't get booked at that full price, then maybe they start adjusting just to try to get, work again. But right after that booking, and if they keep getting other ones, it doesn't matter if anyone's making money. That's what their value is in their mind.
And I had mentioned at the last episode that we did a booking a few years ago with a guarantee of $20,000 plus costs, plus fee, plus flights. We weren't covering the hotels, and I remember, and in retrospect, yeah, we were not really that experienced or that knowledgeable, and also my mind was a little bit clouded with wanting to get the deal done, and believe me, we'll devote an entire episode to this whole escapade, because there's a lot of funny stories attached to it.
Oh yeah.
But we're in a spot now where we're 20 grand. It was 25 grand all said and done, but when you factor the flights, because they had to be expensive flights, heaven forbid they weren't. I'm getting flashbacks to this. And so we're 25 grand in the hole. Now we're there for the weekend. So my bet was that we would make 25 grand over the course of the weekend, and then hopefully break even, and then we would have enough inventory from stuff that we would get them to sign for us that we would be able to sell in the future and make money on that. And so I put myself and frankly the hobby into a little bit of a pickle by making a guarantee that high, which I, in retrospect, probably shouldn't have done. And I think we can. At the end of the day, the economics worked out, but only barely. And what we did now was we basically created a nightmare scene where there's a good chance that guest will never get booked again, because
Oh yeah,
I don't see anyone else offering that $20,000 plus expenses guarantee. So
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
as guests get, especially when you're talking Hollywood types that have, certain inflated egos to begin with, they get older, traveling is less, easy to begin with. I can't imagine, these people taking a smaller guarantee. So, like you said, you've sort of created this expectation.
Yeah, and frankly, what we would have to charge fans, then you wonder, am I going to even draw enough fans at that price to is there enough demand to meet this person? So I mean, I freely admit, in that instance, we created um, exactly what a problem that we're talking about now by offering that guarantee. What we did was we kind of set a line, and we and an expectation, and created a value um, in the marketplace. And so to transition to the next piece here, um, there are consequences in the market for the rising costs of these guests, and the consequences is a decrease in choice. The number of and we've discussed this a lot. The number of conventions running today is significantly lower than the number of conventions running 10 years ago.
Agreed. I feel like I would argue that there is perhaps a higher level of big time established, like, you know, there was never a Fanatics Fest. There was, there's a lot of big shows now.
Right. Well, but
There's
that's a consequence of rising costs, right? The
100%.
little guy gets pushed out.
Yeah, the little guy is out. Rising costs, that gave life to this stuff. Because let's look, decades in the rear view. Superhero actors like Adam West, Burt Ward, the, ignoring inflation, current market, and all that stuff. The percentage of their income that they were making from doing signings compared to, what actors are making today, you wouldn't have the Chris Hemsworths doing signings for like a Burt Ward, Adam West type of payday. The fact that prices go up like that is what made these A-listers view this as something worth their time.
Right, but like any other economic system, when you have the big money coming in, it squeezes the small time players out.
Oh, 100%. The small time shows are,
I mean, in the Northeast, you see, I mean, not that they were a small time player, but Wizard World is out completely. They sold their convention assets to Fan Expo. Heroes and Villains and Walker Stalker was also, they started out as a small, they blew up. They're out. They were bankrupt in 2019. Our stomping grounds were the wrestling conventions of the Northeast, and we definitely hope to have it at least one of the guys who ran those big guns to kind of explain what their business model was. But their business, and they've freely talked about this and admitted to this in public, their business model of running those cons, those wrestling cons, where we met so many classic superstars, the business model doesn't work anymore, and so they don't run
no.
them. And so all those cons that used to run in the Northeast and in the South, they don't run anymore at all.
Yeah, at that point, I don't want to tell someone else's story, so I'm just going to be as vague as possible. But some of those big wrestling conventions we're talking about have now evolved, and they're doing great business in another way, because that's what their business model of today with post-COVID market you know, that's the best bet for them. And I would love to have some of those people on, like Sean said, to fully get into, how their business works and all the, achievements they have of the past.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. Like, back in 2013, 2012, 2011, we were going to cons once a month, maybe more, actually.
Yeah.
There were so many cons, and now, you scale you're scaling these back because, um, number one, going to a con used to mean spending a couple $100. Now you can't go to a con without spending a couple thousand. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing is they're just not there. They don't exist.
No.
And so we've definitely seen how the rising costs have affected that landscape. But I'm gonna be really forceful about this. Just because the costs of meeting talent have increased does not necessarily mean that the secondary value of those talents has increased. In fact,
Oh.
in fact, it's sometimes the reverse of that. It's sometimes that the more someone appears out in public, um, the lower their price will go on the secondary market, because the what used to be something that was rare is now a little bit more publicly available.
Yeah, you have just to go back to like wrestling, you have, guys like Tito Santana and Greg Valentine who probably signed 100,000 pieces over their signing careers, and the more they come out, that number goes up, and it just doesn't equate.
I was even thinking, the name that came to mind was The Undertaker, because I remember when The Undertaker's secondary market value was super high, because The Undertaker was a notorious, shall we say, how about this? He was notoriously unfriendly
Yes.
in public, and so his autographs were rare. Undertaker signed with an autograph agent as he was nearing retirement, and in retirement he signed a ton more, and now his agent tries very, very hard to control the prices on his secondary market prices by limiting what he can sign and what he will sign. But the prices on Undertaker on the secondary market have absolutely plummeted. And so you will 100%, I'm using him as an example, if you pay convention prices to get an autograph from the Undertaker, the value on that piece decreases by 30 to 40% as soon as it enters your hands. And that's just true.
That is absolute fact. If you simply, let's say you discovered this podcast and you never had an autograph in your life. If you want an Undertaker autograph, you can find one on the secondary market that is, reputable COA, completely authentic for, like he said, 30-40% less than what Undertaker's representatives are charging. That pricing only works if you have the actual stuff that you want signed, your own personal items that you want signed in the color pen you want, and you understand that you're not going to turn around and flip this the next day for anything. This is simply a labor of love for something you want in your collection.
So all that said, where do we see the future of autograph pricing? Is it more of the same? Is the convention scene going to hit a day of reckoning, and we're going to see another radical shift? Where are we going?
I think it's going to be mostly more of the same. I think there's going to be ebbs and flows. I know there's some vendors I've spoken to. Some people have told me they think the wrestling convention game has like a 5-year window and then it's kaput. It's done. When the old timers like the Bret Harts and those names sort of, for whatever reason stop appearing,
Death
and
being the
you're
primary
left with,
reason.
yeah, and you're left with the guys nowadays, the Romans, the Cenas that are making like, astronomical amounts of money in their current careers in comparison, that aren't going to take, affordable convention pricing to come to take a booking.
Yeah, but outside
It's gonna
wrestling,
be,
we still have
yeah,
television and movies, and low
yeah,
end. I think people don't realize how low paid many TV actors still are.
Yeah,
and so a lot of TV actors do this. So we still have TV and movie cons. It's not just
yeah,
wrestling, but even TV and movie cons. It's tough to sell a an actor who's made you know $250,000 a year on a convention appearance for $5,000, right?
yeah. I think looking at the TV and movie cons, I think it's kind of scary on the mid-level type names that the pricing gets completely like just off to the races, and it's kind of, as we discussed, kind of crazy what some of these people are charging. Flip side, I think it's honestly a more exciting time than ever because let's look at like private signings and even some public ones. Is there really any A-lister, old, young, or anywhere in between, that you think is completely impossible to do a signing?
At this time, no. In fact, years ago there were certain names like there's no chance they would do it. And now, I mean, multiple companies, or I shouldn't say multiple, well, there have been multiple private signings with Robert De Niro. There have been
Yeah.
multiple private signings with Al Pacino. Um, I think there are, in terms of sports, right? I mean, I guess in my estimation, one of, if not the biggest sports star in the world is Tom Brady. There's multiple private signings with Tom Brady. There have been through Upper Deck multiple private signings with Michael Jordan. So um, I guess no one's off the table, but at the same time, that certainly limits accessibility to the hobby, and I wonder if this hobby becomes inaccessible to the public. I mean, at the start, look, we have our roots in people mailing scraps of paper to baseball players and movie stars, and what we've become is paying $500 for Joe Pesci to use a silver deco paint pen on a particular glossy print, which actually has a value of $200 on the secondary market, and that's where we're at,
Yeah,
and that,
without question, you're going to lose a lot of that identity, if not all of it. Because, and not to go deep off onto a tangent here, but when you look at these A-listers that are now charging and making big money to sit in a room and do these private signings, I would have to imagine for the vast majority of them that, are you going to go running around at a premiere or a talk show taping signing for free? Like, this is, you're taking money off your, you know, bank account to give these away. This is a business. This is it. Back in the day when Mr. Rogers was sending a nice little letter to a fan, he didn't see the money in this. Maybe he wouldn't have cared even if he had. That's a debate, but it wasn't a business like that. It was just a labor of like reaching back and connecting with your fans.
exactly. So, yeah, I mean, so we're gonna wrap up here. By the time anyone who's listening, by the time you hear this, we will have attended Contropolis in Secaucus, New Jersey. We're heading out there this Saturday. So by the time this is published, you will have heard that, and so we're definitely going to devote at least a few minutes next time around to talking about that. And once again, if you are in the market for autographs, we have a lot of stock from our previous signings on markedoutcollectibles.com. You can check out our eBay store, which has all our stock as well, on marked-out-collectibles, or our sister eBay store at ny-collectibles. If you want to contact us for any reason, even if you want to, criticize the show, or you have questions or guest suggestions, or questions about anything, or if we made any mistakes, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com. We do have a couple of private signings coming up, and we have one more than the last episode we added as well. So we have former WWE superstars, the Bella Twins / Garcia Twins. All items and orders for them are due by July 20th. We have Melissa Barrera, who starred in the 2022 Scream and also in Scream 6. All items and orders are due August 1st. The new one here, and Dana is running this one. You want to talk a lot about Joe Hendry?
Yes, the rising star. He is seen on TNA. He's seen on NXT. You say his name and he will appear. Mr. Joe Hendry. We are doing a private signing courtesy of our friends at Sorrentino Promotions. We have some awesome metallic edits, and I don't only say that because I designed them, but they are, I think, pretty cool looking.
There's that one where it
Uh,
looks like he's farting on that guy's head, and I
yeah, you
stand by
kind
it.
of you may have ruined that one for me, but I still like the concept. So we're rolling with it. Joe Hendry, say his name, and he farts out confetti on people's heads. He does it all. We are not taking mail-ins for this. This is strictly metallic prints only, 8x10 and 11x14. Please reach out to Jerry Sorrentino if you have any personal items you would like to send in.
And then finally, we also have again our private signing with WWE Hall of Famer, ECW owner and founder, co-founder, I should say, Paul Heyman, which is due by all orders and mail-ins due by November 7th. So that about wraps it up. We are going to keep with the weekly format for now. So this episode will air on July 15th, and then our next episode will air on the 22nd. After that, we're going to keep with our weekly Monday releases. So we definitely look forward to the next one. We have lots of stories to share, and hopefully lots of dirt to dish. So for Marked Out Radio and Marked Out Collectibles, I'm Sean,
And I'm Dana.
and we'll see you next week.